31, Parks and Reserves Bylaw, the report back on the scattering of ashes. Who's telling about this? Is there a staff member? Or is it just...
Probably Claire. She was here before, Claire Bryant's.
Oh, sorry.
Or could Mary, maybe?
Probably not.
Brendan, are you able to speak to this? Keeping your head down over there.
Well, we can wait for Claire to come back. We can wait for Claire to come back if that's helpful, unless you want to cover it. It's probably better to have right? Okay, so we'll just go on to the temporary alcohol ban. So we'll come back to item 31. Temporary alcohol ban in Riccarton Park areas on New Zealand Cup Day.
Happy to move.
Jimmy moves. Yep, Glenn seconds. Put that. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, carried. Regulations and Consents Committee. Dave?
We passed that earlier.
Just, yeah, we have. So, sorry. So,
Claire's in the room now.
33 has already been passed. Do 34 before we call on Claire. Strategy and Finance, Council Controlled Organisations. Item 34. Raf moves and Jamie seconds. Put that. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, carried. Claire, do you want to come and tell us about item number 31? Thanks, Claire. Right. Scattering ashes.
Shall I do a quick recap?
Yeah,
because it's got a rather long history.
Yes.
Okay, so back in 2014, we staff undertook the scheduled review of the Parks and Reserves Bylaw, which includes obviously the standard consultation procedure, special consultation procedure, and a hearings panel. So that hearings panel reported back to Council in November 2014. Council referred that report back to the hearings panel over 3 issues: scattering ashes, the clause 6, the clause 9 to do with cars parking in parks, and clause 13, the aircraft clause, which was just a word around ordinarily. As you know, you may remember that recently Council adopted an RPAS policy which connects to the aircraft clause in the Parks and Reserves Bylaw, in the sense that in the bylaw it says 1 kilogram and the RPAS policy says 1.5 kilograms. So hence the Regulation and Consents Committee is recommending that that you also consider approving a resolution around amending the bylaw from 1 kilogram to 1.5 kilograms in terms of weight. But then, of course, we did go off, and the hearings panel looked at those 3 issues and reported back in March 2015. And the council at that point largely accepted the proposed bylaw in principle, but it did ask for more targeted consultation around the scattering of ashes clause. In particular, they wanted us to talk to the previous submitters and some new key stakeholders, such as the relevant Runanga, the New Zealand Funeral Directors Association, and the Canterbury Cremation Society. So, in the report, you'll find that consultation results summarised in Table 1. Mahanui Kurateo undertook consultation for us with the relevant Runanga, and their report back is attachment B. To a large extent, the consultation, the Runanga in particular, have moved a long way from their previous submission that they made to the original Parks and Reserves Bylaw. They had originally wanted a prohibition, but moved towards being open to non-regulatory approaches, but their preference was for that council explore designated sites in parks, and that those be developed with Runanga in terms of the management guidelines for those designated sites, and also their preference really was that we actually scatter gardens and cemeteries, for example, because that's already an existing place for such a business. And probably the New Zealand Funeral Directors Association, their preference was for a non-regulatory approach. Most of the community boards we talked to, that was also a preference, and the Canterbury Cremation Society. did have a preference that the council provide some sort of alternatives, not just say restrict it, but actually provide some alternatives for people, because it is a practice that many members of the community wish to undertake. So in summary, really, the rationale that for the recommendations in the report are that we do adopt the proposed Parks and Reserves Bylaw, now 2016, because the consultation was undertaken in this council term. If we choose not to adopt it at this time, we will have to go back, either wait until I think it's 2023 before the next review is scheduled, or go through the whole special consultation procedure again with the new council. And the rationale for a non-regulatory approach to scattering of ashes is largely because of the difficulty we would in practice have enforcing it, to do with the way in which the practice is undertaken, say in our parks or any of our public places. The difficulty is that you might have people gathering for some time, but that's not an issue. It's the scattering of ashes, which will happen very quickly, and it will be difficult to enforce.
Thank you. Shall we just have any questions to start with? So just questions if there are any. Andrew.
Thank you, and this is a question, although it will require a little bit of explanation as to how it becomes one. I'll be as quick as I can. I have a concern that Stanbury Park remains in the report considered a suitable place for scattering ashes, bearing in mind the comment in the MKT report on page 233 of our agenda. So this is the commentary from Onukun. The final response from Onuku Runanga is that they remain opposed to the scattering of ashes at Stanbury Park, yet it remains in the report. So it interests me, clause 6.5 on page 218 of the agenda, the fact that Naitua Hariri Runanga are now supportive of the position taken is noted, but the fact that Onuku Runanga are opposed to the scattering of ashes at Stanbury Park isn't contained in that part of the report. Given that we know the local Runanga are opposed, and given that we've got the recommendation that management guidelines for any agreed site are to be developed with the relevant Runanga, and we know that in this case the Runanga are not in agreement with that site, I'm interested in why Stanbury Park remains in there. I'd prefer to see it removed. I guess my question is, to what extent did the committee consider the conflict between leaving Stanbury Park in there and the response from the local Runanga, particularly in the context of the agreement that we have further conversation with Runanga, and why is it still there if that was considered?
My understanding is that the recommendation is simply that staff now go and identify some designated sites. So those sites were the sites that were consulted on, so we've included them in the report, but that in no way means that any of those sites would end up necessarily having to be the designated sites. But it interests me, though, that we would publicly say we consider Stanbury Park to be a site which could be considered suitable, when we're saying we respect the views of Runanga, and the view of Runanga is this is not a suitable place and we don't support it. I think there's a potential cultural insensitivity there, and unless we're giving very little weight to the views of Runanga, I find it really difficult to see why it would continue to be there. No, well, we can take it out. Not a problem at all. I mean, it's in there because there were some sites, it was included in the original consultation with Runanga, because it had some sites in it that met the sort of those conditions that we've identified in 6.2, like it's not a sports park, it's not a community park, it's not a garden or heritage park. There are some sites within it that weren't within 50 metres of a waterway or a picnic site. So that's the only reason it was included in the original consultation.
Okay,
so we can take it out.
I think given the response from Runanga, I think it would be reasonable to take it out. So however we want to do that, I'll move an amendment if necessary.
Okay, is there any debate on this?
Any?
Debate. I'm assuming that was the only question, because that's the only hand I saw up. Is there now any debate? Yep, Glenn.
Oh, thank you. So, notwithstanding that issue, but I look at the recommendations over staff clarifying around the parks, I do support this I've got two main points. I think it strikes a good balance between kind of choice and protocol, and I wish to note that cultural protocol exists not only for Māori but also for Pākehā as well. I think that can't be underestimated. I know that from experience in my previous role. Secondly, in terms of kind of oversight of it, in practice, that will probably come down to the funeral directors on the day. So I think there's some, we can have some degree of confidence that the scattering of ashes will be undertaken in a reasonably respectful manner. You can never completely control it, as you've said, Claire, or police it, but I know when it actually comes down to it that I think it will be undertaken in a respectful manner. But I wholeheartedly support, obviously, taking our communities with us through MKT, for instance. I don't support a laissez-faire approach that you can scatter them where the heck you like. I think that really is insensitive. But this seems to strike a good balance between, reasonable freedom to do that, but also having identified places for them.
Okay. Dave, I'm assuming you're closing the debate. Yep.
Look, as chair of that hearings panel, this has been a particularly vexatious issue that's gone backwards and forwards 2 or 3 times now. And in the last resolution, we've asked staff to go back and investigate the matter further, and they've come forward with this report, which I'm very, very comfortable with. And for me, there are 2 key elements in this. One, we adopt a very educative approach to the issue of scattering ashes, and secondly, we recognise the practicalities of enforcing a bylaw that would prohibit the scattering of ashes. So I think we have come a long way from where we were earlier, and that this resolution, albeit addressing the Stanbury Park and perhaps a couple of other issues like that, we've got to a stage now where I think that we can, and I would urge that we do accept this resolution today, because, as Claire says, going forward it could be several years before we're able to come back to it again, and it would be good to get this matter resolved within this council term. So, look, I'm very happy to recommend move the recommendation that's before us today.
Can I just suggest, I'm assuming everybody's okay with Andrew's suggestion on Stanbury Park. Can we just suggest in part 1B that designated sites excluding Stanbury Park?
Yep, I'm very comfortable with that. Thank you.
Is that okay? Does that make sense to where you want to take it? Okay. So it's moved, Dave, and seconded, Tim. Okay, put that. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, carried. Thank you. It's been a long time coming. Thank you for that.